My name is Majd Saboura. I am currently working with vAuto. Before that, I worked with Mannheim, and my pure focus was focusing on international. So I spent the 2.5 years studying the international landscape and the markets through Asia, Africa, Middle East, and Europe, trying to identify pockets of where US inventory is valuable and figure out ways to get it over there pretty efficiently. So building supply chains across channels to get cars from here and send them over there. So once I discovered all that, and then I started focusing on the US market, trying to understand the wholesale industry, try to really understand where the cars are, what are valuations, how can I get these cars for the best price and buy them in bulk and be able to put them on boats and get them out of the country. So that was really my focus for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent a lot of time in consumer side, truly understanding consumer behavior, trying to figure out what drives people to go buy a car, what is their shopping process, how do they get from A to B to Z, where do they go to look for pricing and so forth, and figure out ways to really target them and be able to drive them to the dealerships themselves, as well as spending a lot of time in dealerships as well, trying to understand how dealerships work, what are the process from sales. I worked from the sales desk all the way back to parts and everything in between to truly understand the whole process. So based on that really I wouldn't say full background, but spent a lot of time in different parts of the industry. And I think that really helped me get to where I am today. And when I say that is really the best part of my job today is using that knowledge and talking with dealers, trying to understand what drives them, how they do their business, and truly understand what makes their business profitable or what are the challenges in their business to try to help them make that better. And every single dealer I talk to really tells me that the most important thing is going out strong at the gate. And that's really buying the car right. It's truly getting the right, if you get the right car, then there's no problem. So it's truly having the right inventory, the right stable or balanced inventory, let me put that way, that really helps them truly get the most profit, makes them effective and efficient, and makes everybody happy. So the 3 components that really drive into that is really understanding what car to buy, where to go buy that car, and of course the most important thing is how much to pay for that vehicle. So those are the 3 prominent questions that any dealer you talk to, and probably most of you guys here, have experienced and asked yourselves, and then try to figure out how to answer that every single day you go buy a car. So it really comes down to is truly having a game plan. So what is your game plan? How do you go out there into the market every single day? And what are the things that you do? What are some of the key metrics that drives you, if you have any? And what is your strategy to go out there and buy those vehicles, to bring them back to your lot, and of course to sell them and go buy more? And it's a whole cycle of it. So it really comes down to football. I'm a decent football fan. I wouldn't say a huge football fan, but it's really having a game plan. It's like you don't go out on a Saturday to a big college game without having a game plan, without understanding the team you're playing, without understanding what the weaknesses are, what the strong paths are, and having different plays that you're going to follow to be able to achieve your goal of winning the game. So the same thing with the car industry, same thing with acquisition, is what is your game plan to go out there and buy that right inventory, and once you identify that right inventory, figure out where it is, and then going to paying for the right price for it. So before I get into that, I really wanted to step back a little bit and take a look at what's happening in the wholesale industry so far, and what are some of the things that are going to impact the industry going forward. So if you look at the past 15, 20 plus years, this is the amount of cars or vehicles that were sold in the through wholesale channels over the past years. And most recently, if you look at 2015, there were about 9.6 million vehicles sold in auctions across the United States. And this is data published by the NAAA, which if you guys are here for the rest of the week, that's the meeting will be, that gathers information from their wholesale partners and publishes this. The interesting thing I want to show you is that these are cars were actually sold in these auctions. It does not show how many cars or vehicles that were presented for sale. And you can only imagine if you have a 50, 40, 50, 60% sell-through rate, so you're talking about over 20 million vehicles at any point in time that were offered for sale in the market. So it really creates a question is like, how do you navigate through 20 million vehicles a year, right? If you take that down, it's a couple 100,000 a month. And the interesting piece about it is if you look back, and we're coming out of the 2008, 2009 slump, and we're coming back up to almost 10 million. And the projection is that we're going to hit over 10 million the next year. And we haven't been to those levels since 2003. And we're going to surpass 2003 numbers. And really what's driving it, one of the driving forces, and you guys might know that as well, is CPO, right? I apologize, it's leasing. The lease penetration for new vehicles have gone up. I think the first half was over 30%, and it's going to continue to be strong. And one of the biggest reasons is that it's the value of a new vehicle. A new vehicle prices on average, I think Kelley Blue Book published a study that said about $35,000 on average to buy a brand new car. And of course, the range goes up to $90,000 and goes down to $18,000 for a subcompact. So the vehicle prices are going up, and consumers are, as you know, are very conscious of payment. So they're really looking at what monthly payment do I have. They don't care about the value of the vehicle. It says, how much am I paying every single month? So that's what's driving these folks to leasing, because they can't afford to buy it outright, but they still want that new car, so they're leasing it. But we all know what happens to all that leased inventory. That leased inventory is going to come back after 24 to 36 months. It's going to come back to the market. So the projections up here is that this is on top of on top of the normal inventory that comes back into the market. So 9.6 million was last year, and they're talking about 3 to 4 million new vehicles coming back into the wholesale market over the next 3 years. So that 10 million number I showed you is just definitely going to get surpassed very, very quickly. So then you step back and you ask the question, and you talk to the economists out there, and you ask them why. What's basic supply and demand, right? You have a lot of supply in the market that's going to drive prices down. But if you guys are keeping up, if you look at it on average, I think depreciation of vehicles have been to 3 to 4%. So it hasn't been that steep downturn of pricing for wholesale inventory that we've expected. It's really more, fairly balanced. So to ask you the question, is that the new normal? Is that the new norm that we have in the industry today? So you have a surplus of supply, but pricing are going to stay down and they're going to stay the same. And there's a couple players that are coming into that affect pricing in the wholesale market. A lot of them could potentially relate to the fleet companies that are holding on to their inventory a little longer because they want to help residual values. The rental companies are potentially holding on to their vehicles a little longer. They're not turning their fleets as quickly as they would like. So there are a couple other reasons why that could be a factor. But I think we need to look at the retail side as well to truly understand what is the impact of the market and what is really driving these values. So this is where it becomes interesting. Of course, you guys know this. This is CPO sales. The CPO penetration has been highest ever, and it continues to be higher in 2016. One of the biggest reasons is the leasing, all those vehicles that are being leased are coming back into the market. Fairly young vehicles with very low mileage that are very attractive for these OEMs to put them on their lease programs. And so they're coming back to the originating dealer, and the originating dealer is being able to flip those and become more CPO vehicles. So CPO sales have gone up. And you ask one of the main reasons, again, is those consumers that really want to buy that new car, but they can't afford it. But they're looking at CPO, which is they get the same benefits as a new car, but it's cheaper, low price. It's a lower price range because they don't really attract it to the leasing because they feel like they want to own that vehicle. So that's one of the reasons it's driving CPO sales, and it's going to continue to go up that way. And if you look at the inventory mix of what dealers are holding on their lots today, and every single quarter, I can see the blue lines are coming in deeper and deeper. So they're holding on to younger, low mileage vehicles. So they're not holding on to that 7-8-year-old vehicle anymore because a lot of these cars are coming back and the originating dealer has to have those cars back. So they're putting them on their lots and trying to sell them. So they really are pigeonholing themselves in an inventory selection because they have to have younger, lower mileage inventory. But that's really helping the independent dealers as well because now they can go out there and get those cars that previously they wouldn't be able to because the franchise dealer was holding on to those a lot longer because they had the privilege of doing that. So if you look at the mix, so it's really creating a little hole in the market because these consumers that are looking for these older vehicles are not able to find them as easily as they did before. And this is the most interesting one, I think, is that the NADA published a study that over the past 5 years, there has been a 20% compression in margin. So we're making less, so there's more inventory, pricing are staying stable, but we're making less per vehicle. And if you look at these are the top 7 publicly traded dealer groups, and if you look at their earnings and their profits over the years, you can see definitely there has been a decline in their profits. So NADA is spot on, of course. But also, if you look at the publications of Penske's and Sonic's that they've come up over the past Q3 earnings, I think their earnings are now $1,600 per vehicle profit. That's how much they're making. I remember back in the day it was close to $2,500. So now it's $1,600, and they're publishing that. And another, Asbury, I believe, was $17,800, something like that. Don't quote me on those numbers, but I know the numbers are right, but I don't know what the dealer groups are. But those numbers are pretty horrific as far as what per gross, that's front end gross, guys, not back end. So it's really a couple of trends that we can look at from the wholesale and the retail side, is that there is definitely an increase in competition out there. There's going to be an increase in supply. There's going to be tons of vehicles coming back into the market. There's going to be such huge selection that it's going to make it even harder to find that right vehicle. And it's going to make it even harder to buy it right, to buy it on the money, to be able to maximize your profit. Because I hope if everybody in this room has a game plan, or at least has a profit goal in mind, that they say, I want to make this per vehicle that I sell. So that is that's an input into your game plan, but it's going to make it much more challenging to make that number on every single vehicle. So what are some of the things that we need to look at to help you navigate through that? So the two common problems that I keep hearing recently because of these trends is becoming harder and harder to find that right car. It is so difficult. I'm spending hours, if not days, going through run lists and trying to understand what is available in the wholesale industry and which cars to go get. And the challenge is that once I identify these cars and I go online to buy them, or I go to the lanes to bid on these, I'm walking away with 2 or 3 cars. I'm not walking away with the 10, 15 cars that I needed, because somebody else is over there overpaying for these cars. And I'll just put a pin in that word overpaying and we'll come back to it. But those are the things that are telling me. And I know a dealer actually out in Texas that this gentleman wakes up every single Saturday, 5 o'clock in the morning, before the family gets up, and goes on the computer, prints the run list for the sale on Monday and Tuesday, and goes through every single car, running vehicle history reports, running condition reports, looking at pictures, looking at VINs, running numbers. The family gets up, they do whatever the Saturday do, they go to bed, he goes back to the computer and does it all over again. Same thing on Sunday. So it's the lifestyle is changing because he feels like he needs to look at all these vehicles to be able to create his buy list so he can go the next week. And then I go back and visit with him and he's like, I have 100 cars and maybe I'm being able to buy 5 to 7 of those 100, which is pretty ridiculous. But it's happening everywhere. And every single dealer, and I'm sure you guys, I see some heads nodding, are experiencing the same things where you have to figure out all these vehicles, where to go get them, how to do it. So then we step back and ask a similar question again and saying, all these vehicles coming back into the market, it shouldn't be this difficult. It really should not be difficult. I should be able to go out there and buy the cars because there's so many of them out there. So why is it so hard? And there's a lot of reasons why it's so hard, because it's really understanding what your market is demanding. And not necessarily your market, what your dealership, what your lot is demanding, because what your lot does could be completely different than the lot across the street from you. The people that walk onto your lot or walk onto your looking for vehicles from you are not necessarily looking for the same vehicles for your neighbor. It's different. Everybody's unique. I think back of it and think about it as a portfolio of stock. Prior to my car industry, I used to work with a portfolio manager, and we used to manage some mutual funds. So I'd like to reference that. And then as I was talking through that, I think about Billy Bean. Who's a fan of Billy Bean? Right? So think about that. It's crunching the numbers, right? It's understanding statistics, understanding the numbers. It's really stepping away from the game of baseball and trying to understand the numbers first. And once you understand the trends and the numbers, you can apply that across. So I like to kind of infer some similarities to inventory here and wholesale buying, is understanding the numbers. Do the numbers make sense first? And then look at the inventory and look at the vehicle. So in order to dive a little deeper into that, I'm going to talk about 2 different profiles of dealers that are out there today that are buying inventory in the wholesale market. And really some of them are the look harder dealers and some of them are the look smarter dealers. So we're going to go into each one and try to understand what the characteristics are. And then it'll be interesting to see which one you fit in. If you don't have to admit it if you don't want to. But it'll be interesting. So what does a look harder dealer look like? Look harder dealer is really that local dealer that assumes they understand the market. I don't say they think. That really is very old school in their ways. They're relying back on their gut instinct. They go back to what they learned from their father, their grandfather, or their grandmother, whoever was in the car industry prior to that and taught them the skills of the trade. Those are the folks that really want to go back and truly averse to technology. They're like, it's okay, I don't really understand it. My nephews and my grandkids have it. I have a phone, but I don't really use it, or I don't understand how to use it. I prefer to print my run lists. I prefer to go to the auction myself. I like to go feel and touch that vehicle. I want to smell it. I can smell the oil. I can tell you exactly what's wrong with this vehicle. I can spot a lemon a mile away, and I'm proud of it because I know what? I have not bought a lemon in the past 10 years. So it's those kind of habits and behavior that is risk averse, that are basically saying, I know everything I need to know about vehicle. I'm going to walk around the lot with my paint meter and touch every single panel to make sure the car hasn't been in an accident. Or use those little common old school methodology that still works, that you cannot, I'm not belittling by any means, because you know what, you need to have that gut feeling for every single vehicle. But that gut feeling needs to be applied later, and that I'll share that with you a little bit later down, is you still need that. You can't just get anybody off the street, give them an iPhone or an iPad or an Android, and they can be a car dealer. They'll be a little bit successful, but they're going to fail eventually. But you still need that car acumen that everybody has, hopefully has, to be able to apply that common sense to the process of buying and selling vehicles. And they're really more habitual. They go to the same auctions every single week. They go to the same auctions every single month. They go maybe 1 or 2 auctions. They're really just, they go to the pre-sale, they walk the lot the day before, they meet up with their buddies, they hang out, they go to lunch afterwards, whatever they want to do. It's habitual. They don't really change how they do things or how they approach things. And they're really, goes back to that dealer I was talking about in Texas. They're going through and looking at cars and multiple hundreds and hundreds of cars. And then they're walking into the auction. And I'm saying walking because they will never buy over simulcast. So walking into the auction, they're sitting there with their buy lists. And they want to buy cars. And then they have some other folks with clipboards. And they're getting outbid in every single car. And they're sitting there shaking their head, saying, how can they overpay for this vehicle? He's paying way over MMR or whatever book value. Crazy, how is he doing that? I just don't understand these kids these days. Those are some of the things that are going through that person's mind, and they're going through that person during the day at the auction. And they're really looking just to replace inventory. So they walk into the auction, goes back to the earlier presentation, you sold 5 cars, you need to come walk back with 5 cars. I've taken the day off, I've come to the auction, I can't leave empty-handed, I need 5 cars. The 5 cars that I really wanted, somebody else paid and overbought, so I need to walk out with something. So they feel like they have to settle because they don't want to waste their day, so they're buying inventory that doesn't necessarily fit their profile or fit their needs, but they feel like they need to buy something. So they're walking away with cars that they don't really need. And those cars are coming back, and they're sitting on their lots and getting aged. And they're getting aged. And we've done some research, and any vehicle over 30 days has no gross left in it. But those vehicles are sitting there for 70, 80, 100 days. We know why, because it's an impulse, because he felt like he needed something. He's done all his research. He's sacrificed hours from his day, and he has to come back with something. So on the flip side, what does a look smarter dealer look like? What are some of the habits and what are some of the things that they do that helps them? How are we doing so far? Good? I know I'm going a little fast, but I know it's half an hour. It's hard to get it all in here. So some of the look smarter dealer goes back to what I was talking about, is having that game plan or having those KPIs or key performance indicators that drive that person's dealership, they understand their inventory and what they do. And it's pretty much 85% discipline and 15% instinct. And what I mean by that is that they already know which inventory they want to go get. Specifically, exactly which exact vehicle they're going to go get, and they're going to go buy it, either through simulcast or through the auction. But you don't want to take the fun away. So you still need some room in there to have some fun, because you know what? You see a car that you really like that's not on your list, but you still want to have fun with it, that you know you can sell, that you know specifically somebody really wants that one. So you're going to have fun with that car. So it's not going to become all numbers and boring part of the job. You still need to have that instinct that you can. But the cool thing about it now is you can afford to see a car and say, you know what, I'm going to go get it. Because you can afford, because you know you have everything else that's going to be right on the money, that's going to be able to provide you the right inventory and the right amount of money from a profit perspective. So you can have fun with it a little bit. And they're really focused on profit. They're not focused. They're so focused on number one in their game plan is profit. How much money am I going to make? And am I going to make the $2,000 on this vehicle? Or am I going to make the $1,600 front end gross on this vehicle? But it's okay, because you know what? Once I take it back to my lot, I can make some money on the back end. But you see, you need to have that balance of inventory on your lot and be able to understand that the best thing about it is you walking into that auction or you're logging into the computer with eyes wide open, because you know exactly what sacrifices you're going to make to acquire that inventory and be able to bring it back to your lot. So what does that look like? So the look like is that you bring and you look across all of the wholesale market. You look at all those 20 million vehicles that are presented for sale, granted as an annual, but you bring them all into one platform. So you don't have to log into multiple different places. So there's aggregators out there, there's tools out there that brings in inventory from all these different auctions. Every single auction house in the United States brings them into one place where you can look at them side by side. So you don't have to keep logging into different platforms and trying to remember what are the search and how you did the search and what are some of the criteria of the filters that you did. And if you click a different filter, you know you're going to get a whole different side of inventory. So how do you bring it all in together to make it to look side by side and be able to eliminate the inventory that doesn't make sense? So you base those KPIs, that game plan, you apply it across all the inventory, and you, with a couple of clicks of the button, you say, show me the inventory that makes sense to me, and I don't want to see anything else because I don't have time. I only want to look at 300, 400 cars. I'm not going to look at thousands. Other habits is that they're 100% looking first and foremost on profit. Once you get the numbers right, then you start going down into the vehicle itself. Once you get the numbers right, then you can start looking at where the vehicle is. So you're looking at a nationwide out there. You're going to see what every single car is available in the market, and then decide, does that make sense into my profile? Does it make sense from a numbers perspective? Is transportation reasonable? Am I buying this car way under from my market is demanding, and I'm able to add some money in through transportation, through whatever it is, to bring that vehicle back to my lot, right? And I'm not looking at the one or two auctions. I'm looking at every single available resource of wholesale inventory out there, because there's not going to be a single car or not a single stone that I'm not going to go and look at it somehow, or go through these, or apply my game plan on it and see if it makes sense or not. And then I'm going to figure out, am I going to go out there physically get it? Does it make sense? If there's more than 4 or 5 vehicles in one auction, maybe it makes sense for me to go there and take a look at those vehicles. But if I'm buying one here and one there, then I have to figure out what the mixture would be. I'm not saying I'm going to go all online. I'm not going to say I'm going to go all physical. There has to be some sort of a balance in how I go there and acquire these vehicles. And there has to make a balance that makes sense for each individual dealership. 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, whatever makes sense. But but you have to be agile and be able to adapt to change and make sense. Does it make sense to drive, to go to that auction, to fly? Is it making money for me? And just really thinking through it from a financial perspective. And then, first and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, is applying math or applying logic and looking at cars that make money for you. So you apply all these different data points. And you look at it from what I'm saying is a total cost of ownership. And total cost of ownership does not mean just auction fees. Total cost of ownership means auction fees, plus reconditioning, plus transportation if there's any transportation, plus am I buying any insurance or any the coverage for my vehicle that I'm going to buy somewhere else? Am I going to protect myself just in case? Or am I going to buy for additional inspection to get a closer look on this vehicle? Those are all aspects of costs of ownership. Do I pack my vehicles? Do I put that in there? Do I put any other variable that you want to include to truly give you a profit-focused plan and looking at it, not buying the car, paying auction fees, bringing that vehicle back to your dealership and start thinking, well, am I going to spend $500 a week on this car, or am I going to spend $1,000? What's my body shop going to do? What's this? What's that? That's too late at that point, because you might be already sunk in that car, which you already brought, which you thought when it came across the lane, you're going to make money on it. You bring it back, and then you realize, yeah, I'm out. So you put that front and foremost, and you start filtering and looking through vehicles that make sense based on those numbers. And then once you identify those vehicles, that's when the car acumen comes in. That's where the condition report comes into play, the vehicle history report. You look at what's going on with the vehicle. You look at the mileage. You look at the tires. You look at whatever you want to go. Then you go if you want to go to the auction, if it's a local one, you go the day before and you walk the lot and you go specifically to those cars. You're in and out in an hour or two, whatever it is. It's not spending hours trying to figure out which cars to go look at. It's truly understanding what are the numbers and then going deeper into it. So looking at transportation, recon, the pack, my auction fees, anything that I want, and then adding in my minimum profit objective. So it's adding a ceiling and a floor, saying what's my minimum worst case scenario, what is my profit margin on this vehicle. And once I put all these variables in there, then I come up with what my floor and ceiling bidding should be compared to books, and then going out there and getting that vehicle. So it's really understanding what you are willing to go in there and sacrifice. And here's the thing, if you're in the lane or you're in simulcast and you're bypassing that number, then you start thinking about, what am I going to give up if I still want this vehicle? Maybe I'll save a couple $100 on my recon. I don't have to do X, Y, and Z on the car. Maybe I'll just do 1 or 2 to be able to pay more for the acquisition of the vehicle, sacrifice down here, and be able to balance the equation, be able to still make that profit. But the great thing about it, again, is you're going in with the eyes wide open. So when the car comes back to your lot, you know exactly what you're going to do. You go tell your people, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Or you go back to your shop, whether it's outsourced or not, and just try to renegotiate fees to say, you're costing me too much money. I can't afford to do this X amount of recon on this vehicle, so we'll figure out what to do. So you can start really looking at your business as a whole rather than just buying the car and figuring it out later. So really focusing in, bringing all those data points, and you're looking at the profit in front. What is making me my money? How much am I going to make on the front end? And then bringing back the impulse, as far as I was mentioning earlier, the 15%, being able to say, I know this customer has been looking for this vehicle, or she's been looking for this vehicle. I really want it, so I'm going to go get that vehicle, but I know exactly what the numbers make, and maybe I'll sacrifice a little bit on the gross because I'm going to win that person and win their business for the future. Again, it's the idea of really understanding what you're getting into and be able to figure out how much you're going to get out of it, whether it's front end or back end, because there are 2 numbers you can make and you can balance the equation. So it goes back to the earlier point I was saying, are these folks that are overpaying for these vehicles in our mind really overpaying? Does overpaying become a number, or does overpaying become a habit, or becomes a different data point? Because does it really buying a car back of MMR or back of book, does it really make sense anymore? If I know I'm going to the auction or I'm going to this wholesale place, wherever it is, and I'm going to buy this vehicle, and I know that I'm going to spend X and Y and Z on this vehicle, and I'm going to bring it back to my lot, and I know, based on my customers and based on what I've been able to do, that I can sell this vehicle and still make my profit on it. Does it really matter if it's 100% of MMR or 110% of MMR? Doesn't really matter, or NADA book, whatever book value you use. It doesn't really matter because that number becomes a data point in my game plan that I can start looking at, but it's not becoming the Bible. It's not becoming the book that I rely on because it doesn't mean anything to my business. I am looking at what makes sense for me based on my game plan, based on my numbers. And then you know what? These valuations and those folks that are sitting there shaking their heads, they'll be shaking their heads at you because they're saying, how is he paying or how is she paying above value? But it doesn't matter because you know exactly what you're going to put into it. You know exactly how much you're going to sell it for, and you're going to make your profit on it. So who cares? So that becomes irrelevant. So it's not really becoming overpaying anymore. Nobody's really overpaying. It's what the market is demanding and what is the market bearing, but more importantly, how much money are you going to make of that vehicle? So if I really try to have a crystal ball and look at the future based on what I've just shared with you and based on what I've learned and try to project what's going to happen the next 2 to 3 years. I wish I could tell because I'm in Vegas. I can bet all in and make millions, but I can just, of course, just base it on assumptions that I think is going to happen. And I do think there is going to be more technology. There's going to be way more technology than we've ever seen before. And it's on us to be able to understand what makes sense for us and which technology to adopt, because we can't go out there and buy every single piece of software. We can't go out there and download every single app and try to consume it. It's trying to really decipher which one makes sense for you specifically and what makes sense for your business and for your market and for your way you do with your lot that you can adopt and bring into your operations. And then maybe it's 2 or 3, maybe it's just 1, but you have to figure out how to adopt technology and be able to use it to your benefit rather than against you. And really it's going to be a shift towards, I think, more to buying online than in lane. I do think that going to auctions, especially now it's becoming, these remarketers that I'm seeing are not shipping cars across geographically. They're having more centralized because it's easier for them, it's cheaper for them, and they're publishing them nationwide. So going in lane is going to be a little bit less and less more frequent, and you are going to have to buy cars online. So you have to figure out how to get more comfortable with that. And there's going to be ongoing margin compressions. I think the 20% is going to continue to go down and down. I don't think there's any relief in that, especially with the increased supply of inventory coming through. And consumers are becoming smarter. I know I didn't touch about that, but the power of the internet, and you guys feel it every single day, these consumers know exactly what's value of these vehicles are, and they're able to squeeze more and more every single time. So the margin is going to come down more and more. So you have to figure out how to buy the cars right, even more importantly. And I think the most important thing is how to become more efficient and effective. You can't really afford to spend 40 hours a week just researching vehicles. You have to figure out how to make your operation more effective and be able to adaptable, to be able to address the consumer demands and dealing with those consumers they want to be interacted with. And so you have to figure out how to become more efficient in your process. So I really want to leave you with one thought. And one thought as you leave this, if you've learned anything or if you're able to examine anything, is go back and think about what is your game plan. What is your game plan today that's going to make sure that you're here tomorrow and you're here for the future? And how are you going to adapt it, and what are you going to change, and how are you going to be able to make it work for your specific business? Because my game plan doesn't make sense for you. Nobody can make sense for you except you. So at this point, I have questions. I think we have some time. I did pretty good in half an hour. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes.
I currently am exporting vehicles every single day to U.S. dealers.
Yep.
So how is that going to affect anything here? I just sold today a dealer on South Carolina. I bought 3 truckloads.
Yep.
2016 trucks from for $30,000 American.
So actually, there's a huge supply coming in from Canada, and actually know a bunch of dealers. So that's the point, is below MMR. And the thing is, they figured out, not to bore you guys with logistics, but there is about a 30-day holding period for a Canadian car to come across the border to clear titles and so forth. But they've been able to work through the supply chain, so now they have a constant supply of vehicles, even though with a 30-day lag, that they have cars coming into play. And so your great point, so looking at Canadian inventory that is listed in Canada before you even bring it into your United States, does it make sense from applying all those numbers? I guarantee you it's 100% does make sense. It doesn't appear on auction, but there are tools out there that will include that data. So auction, if you go to Mannheim, or if you go look at Odessa, there's a different auction for Odessa, Canada. Same thing for Mannheim, Canada, that you have to go and register with the inventory. But the whole idea is, how do you bring in, again, that inventory from North America, well, not Mexico, but Canada and US, to take a look at it. So 100% Canadian vehicles are hot, and the dollar is now down, and there's tons and tons of inventory coming in. And not only coming to the US, just going outside as well. We'll talk afterwards. Anybody else has a question? Then my contact information is up here. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions. I'm more than happy to answer them outside or anything. I hope you were able to learn something. I was able to light up some light bulbs there somewhere, and I wish you guys all the best.